Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to our /EntitledPeople, where people literally think it's all about them and nobody else matters. And in today's episode, Karens are calling cops on people for the most ridiculous reasons ever, guys. And a lot of the times, it's backfiring hard. I hope you enjoy the stories, don't shake your heads too hard, and as always, you can send or link your post to this email right here. Let's dive in. I work in retail at the moment, but my favorite story comes from when I used to help out my parents' business over the summer when I was in high school. This also happened 10 years ago, so some details are fuzzy, but I'll try my best to recall it as it happened. Honestly, I didn't do much other than sit around and pretend I was working, so I was mostly just a spectator for this incident. The cashier we had at the time was a very serious, no funny business older woman who was very strict about any and all policies we had in place. One of them being no returns without a receipt. So one day, this older man comes in demanding his money back for something he bought, with no receipt and on this item that I'm pretty damn sure he didn't even buy from us. Of course, he was told no, it wasn't possible, but we could give him an exchange for something else. But he wasn't having that. The guy wanted his money back right now. Now, the cashier could be a tough lady, and when people gave her a hard time like this, she tended to be even more firm and strict with the rules, and she was not going to let this man have his way. This, of course, really upset the guy, and he was visibly red in the face, and I remember seeing him start to sweat a lot. At that point, I went to get my dad because of how the situation was escalating. When we went back, the guy was still shouting at the cashier about the damn refund. We all watched as he grabbed the closest item to him, which happened to be a box of toothpaste, ripped it open, and began to squirt it all over the floor and the counter. Before we could even react, the guy screams, "I'm calling the cops. You guys are all thieves." He then grabs a second box of toothpaste, and he does the same, and then a third. My dad was pissed, but he told us to leave everything exactly as is and to let him just do his thing. Well, the guy's outside the store now, and he's pacing back and forth while waiting for the police to come. Meanwhile, we're inside with the toothpaste all over the place, just waiting to see what'll happen. Eventually, the police come, and the man runs up to them, probably spewing some lies or whatnot. The cops come inside, and they ask us the standard questions about the store policy, and if there's signs, which were all printed and posted in very visible locations. And that's when they notice the mess by the counter and the floor. They look at it and they asked, "Who did this?" And that's when the customer very proudly proclaims, "I did." The cops kind of laugh at this point and they tell the man that we didn't violate any laws by not giving him a refund, and that we could actually press charges for vandalism, and that it's a good idea to leave now before he's in handcuffs. The man looked extremely flustered, and you could tell he realized how bad that looked, and he just took off. Now, in hindsight, it's kind of a funny story, but at the time, I was terrified of what would happen. Yeah, I have no idea what that guy was thinking. Like, maybe he thought the cops would come and congratulate him on his creative way of sticking it to the man for not giving him what he wanted. Because surely, squeezing toothpaste all over the place and then calling the cops is a great way to get what you want. Some people just aren't too bright, I tell you, and that man was about as sharp as a bowling ball. And if you guys think that person was not smart, listen to this person's comment. "So this happened a decade ago, and I still think about it sometimes. I just can't believe someone can be this stupid. I work at a grocery store, and sometimes I have to work the register when it's a really busy day, like on this day. So everything's going fine until this dude walks in to buy rolling papers and smokes. He looks about 15, so I ask for ID. And this is when he starts arguing with me that apparently he's 21. So I just say, "Just show me an ID that says you're 21. He then goes on to tell me how he never needs ID to buy tobacco, and it's not required, and our store is profiling him. I just think to myself, okay dude, not true, but whatever. At this point, the other manager comes up because this dude's yelling, saying we're wrong for needing his ID. The manager tells the guy if he doesn't like it, he can go somewhere else. The dude then leaves, and I think that's the end of it. About 10 minutes later, the guy walks back in with his ID. And not only is he asking for wraps and cigarettes, he starts threatening me because I made him walk home to get his ID. This is when I tell him if he's going to act like that, I'm not serving him. He then tries to go to the other girl to serve him, and I tell her, don't. And this is when he freaks out, and he tries to come behind the counter. The guy gets like 2 feet in before the manager comes over and starts making him leave. He goes outside, but he comes back in 5 minutes later, and he does the same thing. The manager and the store owner at this point is pushing the dude outside. The dude runs away. We think it's the end of it again, but we call the cops anyway to make a report. Well, the guy comes back a 3rd time. He's outside, but now he's waving a gun around. But this time, the cops pull up, and they see he has a gun, and they arrest him for attempted robbery and assault, and I don't know what else. So guys, don't bring a gun to a store because your dumbass forgot your ID. See, I never understand why people feel the need to escalate it to the point where they get arrested. Like, that guy had multiple chances to leave and not come back, yet he kept on coming back. The thing some people do never ceases to amaze me. Like, go get your ID, buy what you need, and go back home. I don't know what he was trying to prove, but I'm glad the cops were there because, you know, some people be crazy. Okay, so this isn't a story about an entitled Karen that I just happened to run into and had to deal with. This person is my mom. So here's some backstory. This happened last year around May. I'm a 35-year-old female, and I was at a town festival/carnival with my kids, who were 6 and 7 at the time. My brother and mother don't get along well, as they both think they're better than everyone else, and they're never wrong. Since he's turned 15, they've been at each other's throats. We were at a carnival that comes once a year, and I'm wandering around with my kids and their father when my phone starts going off over and over again. When I answer, I can hear my brother on the other line, crying, begging to come stay with me. I tell him where I am, and that the only way he can come stay with me is if it's alright with our mother, as she's pulled some outrageous stuff in the past. He then goes on to tell me that mom's drunk, and they got into an argument and that she had busted the door to his room trying to get to him. Now, I don't know how much of this to believe, as he's a bit dramatic, and he tends to embellish stories. They both do. I get a call while on the phone with him, and it's my mother, and before I answer, it goes to voicemail. So after calming him a bit, I agree to hang up with him and call my mother to see if I can calm the situation down for both of them and get her side of the story, as the truth is usually somewhere between their two stories. I go ahead, hang up, and check my voicemail. The voicemail's my mother yelling into the phone. She's screaming at me saying, "Listen here, young lady, you'd better not be even thinking about coming to get him, because I will call the police and say you kidnapped him, or that you're aiding and abetting a runaway, and you will go to jail. Don't test me." As I stand there a little shocked, I decide to call my mother and explain that I told him no, and that the only way I would come get him is if she was completely okay with it. So the phone call goes something like this. I call her and say, "Hey mom, I'm sorry if he or I gave you the wrong idea. I told him I wouldn't come get him unless..." This is when mom cuts me off and says, "Unless he wants to run away? Unless I'm drunk?" I tell her, "No, I told him I wouldn't come get him unless you were okay with it." She then says to me, "Oh, I'm sure that's what you said." Well, I won't have to worry about it because I've already called the cops, and I've told them about your plan to come kidnap him. Don't you dare come to my house or get your brother, or you will spend the night in jail. At this point, I tell her, "Mom, I'm at a carnival with my kids, your grandchildren. I'm not coming to kidnap anyone. What the heck is wrong with you? Why would you even call the cops for something that hasn't even happened?" She then says to me, "You test me and you will be arrested for this, and then you will both learn who's in charge here." At that point, I angrily hang up the phone. And since we're at a town-wide event, there's officers here keeping the peace. And since my mom's called the cops on us many times before, I get really paranoid. So I walk up to one of the officers and I tell him the story. and ask him to please verify that I'm at the carnival in a public place and that I have no intentions of kidnapping anyone, despite what my mother is saying. The officer just chuckles, and he agrees to make a report to verify my whereabouts and intentions, just to keep a record of things. It turns out, being drunk, my mother did call the cops, and they came to her house. Since she had no reason to call them because I wasn't a kidnapper, and she was being disorderly, rude, and aggressive towards the police, and the fact that she and my 15-year-old brother were drunk out of their minds, she was arrested. My mother even had the audacity to call me from the jailhouse to ask me to bail her out, to which I just said to her, "No, Mom, you might consider it a kidnapping. I can't take that chance. Sorry." But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this post, and it still angers me to this day if I think about it. My mother went to AA, and she's doing much better though. Well, at least there's that, right? And it's good to hear that OP's mom is doing much better. With that said though, it is so infuriating that some people literally use cops as a manipulation tool out of spite, especially when it's a parent using it on their kids. It's just nice to see how it backfired. I also love how OP handled it at the end, throwing mom's words right back at her. So this is a story of an entitled roid rager from the early 90s. You know the type. Huge, twitchy, lived in the gym, basically this guy. Unfortunately, I was on the express lane that day. We had gotten word that secret shoppers reported people in the express lane with big orders. It was a valid complaint. They weren't putting enough cashiers on due to a cost-cutting measure instituted by the regional director, so the lines were ridiculous. We'd been taking them on express when it was empty. Regardless, we now had strict instructions of no more than 20 items in the 12 or less lane. Doing so could get you written up, hurt your raises, or even result in termination if you got 3 inside some time period I forget. So that said, roid rager and his girlfriend and their very full cart hop into my express lane, while an elderly lady's just finishing up her transaction. At this point, the girlfriend's whining to roid rager about the wait. She wants to go somewhere else, that this is boring, and that's when he tells her to shut the F up. They got into a mild spat instead of putting things on the belt, so I just let them be to finish the elder lady's transaction. When I was with her, the guy snaps at his girlfriend. He was saying something like how they're checking out right now and to stop being a whiny bitch. As kindly as possible, I point out the 12 items or less sign, and I explain that I wasn't permitted to check out anyone with more manager's orders, that there were lines open down that way. This is when the guy leans over the counter at me, and he starts yelling in my face very loudly that he didn't have time to wait and listen to his girlfriend bitch, and that I would be checking him out immediately or else. That's when I hit my panic button and I flipped on my register light. That automatically calls the police, and it set off silent alarms in all the back areas of the store. The guy starts slamming his things down on the belt as I attempted to explain that I called a manager, that I couldn't ring up his things without approval. I could literally get fired for it. And that's when he really starts to lose it. He informs me quite loudly that he has a complaint too, that our lines were ridiculously long and people had things they need to do. The guy was slamming stuff on the counter so hard, a couple of things even opened. At this point, the manager runs up from the back, where he'd been dealing with a delivery issue. Now, the manager wasn't a small man, but this roid rager was frickin' huge. The manager tells me to go in his office and that he'd handle this. So I fled, but the guy didn't take it that well. The roid rager demands that the manager bring back the C word to ring him up, as he doesn't want some pencil-neck suit guy to do it. My manager was quite firm that nobody would be ringing him up, and asked him to leave. And this is when the dude loses it completely. He starts swearing, arm-waving, knocking magazines off the display, kicking over shelves, everything. And the girlfriend didn't even cower at this like you'd think. She starts whining how long they'd been there and how she didn't want to do it all over again and to do what her boyfriend wants. The guy then starts yelling something about being done with this, and then he gave his mostly full cart a mighty shove. The thing went careening down towards produce and straight into a Kool-Aid display, knocking the entire thing over and scattering hundreds of packets of Kool-Aid across all the produce. He then physically drags his girlfriend out by the arm, and we never saw them again. About 15 minutes later, the cops show up. They took our reports and security footage, but nobody knew his name or anything useful. The parking lot cameras had bad coverage, and they didn't see anything helpful either. This was the one and only time I ever cried at work. It was terrifying. The guy was so loud and massive, and I'm a small woman. And to make matters even worse, that Kool-Aid display was my job to fix before I clocked out for the night. The manager did help me, as did most of the staff once they were done with their areas. But it was a good hour and a half putting back together the cardboard display, which was a dented mess, and then sorting hundreds and hundreds of Kool-Aid packets back in their correct slots. It is such a shame that the guy got away with what he did. It would have been nice to see a shiny pair of handcuffs on the dude. Like seriously, terrifying situation to be in for OP. Like she was literally dealing with the Hulk and he was seeing nothing but red. Like some people have zero patience already, and add testosterone to that, holy moly. But yeah, back to express lanes. This person shares a comment that says, "One time, I watched a lady pull up to the express checkout and send her 2 kids to go get empty carts. She then counted out her groceries until each of the 3 carts had 12 items in it, and then she gave her kids money to pay for what was in their carts." All I thought was, damn, that's a lot of trouble to go through just to keep from waiting in line a few more minutes. I used to work at a nightclub for many years as a side gig. The club had a lot of pretty diverse events, but every Saturday night was one of the biggest parties in the city, so it brought out the basics in droves. Just your regular young city dwellers or bridge hoppers flocking to get their groove on. This place would get packed. It was like squeezing through a sardine can packed. Like, it was so packed that often people couldn't even dance. They just stood all smashed up against each other, sort of wiggling a bit, at least back in its heyday. One of my jobs was to tend to the bathrooms, which surely meant that in a past life I was likely a baby murderer or something, given how disgusting that chore was on busy Saturday nights. Honestly, that part of the job alone I have several tales of woe from. There were more than a few bathrooms, and one was a single stall on the top floor. This one always had a line and had the most issues, as people liked its privacy, and they'll do all sorts of things you can imagine people doing during a raging party. I've seen some things. Anyways, I marched my merry butt up the stairs, fighting the crowd back as best as I could to refresh the tiny bathroom, and as usual, there was quite a line. Now, I'm not only in uniform, with a radio hanging off my butt, cleaning towels, etc., but my arms were full of toilet paper. I tried to communicate as best I could over the loud music and the endless screaming that I need to go next, so they'd have the ability to wipe if needed. Even though the line was filled with wobbly people desperate to use the toilet, they all seemed to understand, except this one Karen. She was young, blonde, and otherwise forgettable, though attractive for sure. She wasn't even dressed up for dancing. She was dressed like she just walked out of a mall on an average day. She was immediately irate, and she starts yelling that I can't cut the line. This was many years ago, so I don't remember all the stuff she spewed, but you'd never guess that this little lady would have a mouth worse than a sailor's. I'm just trying to assure her drunk butt that I'll just be 2 seconds, as all I had to do was put down toilet paper and wipe a surface, unless somebody was actually dead in there. And the thing is, she's not even next in line, for F's sake. That's when the door opens, and immediately I rush inside, and Karen tries to follow me into the single stall bathroom. She's losing her mind, and I'm scared, so I quickly start shutting the door, careful to not close her in it at the same time and lock it. I then radio security for help and wait. I'm a coward, so I wait until security gave me the all clear to leave. I didn't think anything more of it because clubs are crazy and stuff just happens on the regular. Later, I'm outside on break, when who do I see? Little Miss Karen in handcuffs. She had been set down on the curb by the police, and I'm asked to give my statement of what led up to this tiny woman attacking security. Her friends were all standing over her yelling, "Get her out of handcuffs, she didn't do anything." And Karen's crying saying I didn't hit anyone. Once I filled out the statement, security told me what she did to them. Once they arrived upstairs at her freaking out on the bathroom door, they tried to calm her down. These guys were huge, but they have a lot of control, and this isn't the kind of club where people get roughed up by staff. But instead of calming down and listening to reason, she went feral. And she starts hitting them on their heads mostly, going for their faces, even leaving a huge scratch on one of the guy's eyes while screaming that she's going to call the cops. And here's the thing, she must have been climbing up the 6'+ guy to injure him in that way. It took everything in me to not die laughing when they hauled her off for assaulting 2 people. I'm also really glad I got her out of the bathroom before she got to me too. I totally agree. Like, after reading what little Miss Karen did to those 6-foot-tall giant security dudes, who knows what she would have done to OP in there, all over line cutting. Again, people love to escalate things to absurd levels instead of letting it go. And the liquid courage that night gave Karen a little bit too much courage. At least, that's what I think. Who knows? I'm a 32-year-old female, and my father, 56, lives with me. After my mom passed a few years ago, he had trouble dealing with life, and I tried to help him out. I had a spare room, and I said he could stay there. My siblings and I then cleaned up my parents' house, and we rented it out, with his 100% agreement. The money covers the mortgage and lets him contribute to my household budget for food and utilities. And he has a little money every month, so he doesn't have to go into his savings or retirement funds. He could go back to work, but he hasn't. I'm not a mental health professional, but he won't go to one either. I think he's depressed, but I can't make that diagnosis. That said, I work from home and only on occasion meet clients for lunch or at their workplace, so my car usually sits for days on end. That's when my father got the idea that I didn't need a car for myself. And when my aunt's car broke down, he started letting her borrow mine, without my permission. So I told my dad if he wants to lend out a car, he should lend out his. He drives a very nice, full-size truck. He then said that my aunt's uncomfortable driving it, and with it being a newer vehicle, he would rather lend out my older car. I said I didn't care, and that I need my vehicle to be available. He then said that family helps family, to which I said my car was mine and not meant to be lent out. I spoke with my aunt and told her to stop asking for my car. And that's when Dad decides to test my patience. He trapped me in the garage with his truck, and he left the house one day knowing I had a meeting. I had to Uber to the meeting. I was almost late. I was absolutely livid. When I got home, his car was still there, but mine was gone. I found out that my aunt had needed it for appointments, and this is when I told him it's time for him to move out. That he's not just inconveniencing me right now, he's actively sabotaging my job. He then cried, saying he's sorry and he won't do it again. I gave him one last chance. There were no problems until yesterday. He lent out my car so my aunt could visit her kid. He had a key made. When I saw that my car was missing, I didn't even ask. I called and reported it stolen. My car has a tracker in it because it's not paid off. It was easy to find. I, in the meantime, had turned off my phone and gone shopping. I was unavailable when everyone started calling me to get me to tell the cops that my aunt has permission to take my car. I feel bad for wasting the cops' time, and my family says my aunt was traumatized. My dad's moving in with her now. I did drop the charges and I cleared everything up, but my family's still mad at me. I'm mostly mad at my father. Am I the a-hole in this situation? 1000% no, because Opie told Dad many times that her car was not to be lent out to anyone, that she needs it, and Dad and Opie's aunt totally ignored what she said. Like, despite Opie telling her to stop using her car, she still took it, and in my opinion, she deserves what she got. Like, sometimes people need to learn the hard way, especially family. And another thing, Opie did not waste the cops' time at all. Her car was literally stolen. Like, just because it's stolen from someone you know doesn't mean it wasn't stolen. But let me know your thoughts. Guys, would you have dropped the charges? I personally wouldn't have, because over the years, I've learned that just because someone's family doesn't entitle them to cross boundaries, ignore feelings, and do whatever the heck they want. Especially when it's family you barely know and don't have a great relationship with, right? That's like an acquaintance taking your things. Again, let me know your thoughts. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of our / entitled people. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's in our / malicious compliance episode, where teachers are running absolutely wild, guys. Go check it out if you haven't. And myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.